Greetings and welcome to Youth Perspective. This is an interactive show where we speak to the youth and we speak to the generation that came before them just to find out how they can assist in the transition. My name is Masichaba Dlamini, and today we are discussing the significance language plays in our society. With me, I have a panel of guests that will further help me unpack this dynamic issue. We'd just like to get introductions out of the way, if we can just start with you.
Right. My name is Tabani, Tabani Dance to be precise. I'm a young professional between the barriers of post-apartheid and after, so young professional between the mix, I'll say. Not old, not young, but somewhere there.
Hi, I'm from an organization called Buntlebo Africa, which promotes African culture, values, and identity.
I'm Tsepiso Semenya. I am a young business person. That's mainly it.
I'm Adolf Marema, the leader of our community and a politician too. Yeah, that's basically it.
All right, with us today, actually joining us, we do have an audience with us. They will be also interacting within the show just to find out from them what their sense is around this topic. Just to start with you, Tabani, what significance would you say language plays in our society, especially on what you just touched on, pre- and post-democratic South Africa?
Well, personally, I think language for me is a sense of identity. The language that you speak identifies you to a certain group of people. So I would really think that if you don't know where you come from and what language you speak, then you've lost your self of identity. Yes. So it's very important in terms of knowing who you are and basically where you come from. So it is important to me, yes.
All right, and then Rufilwe, with you being sort of culturally inclined, what would you say is the importance of teaching a child speaking their mother tongue at a very early age? Because we do know now that we have kids who are 5 or 6 years old and they cannot speak their mother tongue. What's your take on this?
I would say language it's a very powerful tool, very powerful. We take for granted or undermine the influence of language. The world over, we are ruled due to language. We are influenced because of the language, and we should not take that for granted. With language, you can gain or be segregated against the resources and many other things. So for me, language, the power of language is actually more than the man itself.
So there was a conference going on. It was 3 days long, which was weird, in KZN about a month or two ago. And literally for 3 days, they were discussing the importance of mother tongue. And apparently the stats that came out to prove that if the first language you learn is your mother tongue, it makes it much easier to learn other languages as you go along. And I feel that a lot of importance has been placed on English. And much as, yes, it is, the business language and it is an internationally recognized language, too much importance has been placed on it. We focus so much on English and having an accent and all of that and forget where we come from, and we can't even communicate with our grandmothers and all of that, which honestly brings a break in generations and all of that. So, yeah.
And with you, Adolf, what have you found that how have you found that language impacts those in and around certain communities with the work that you do?
Firstly, for Africans, I would want to believe that an injustice has been done and it's continuing to be done. I'll give you a very simple example. In university, you have a question paper that is English and Afrikaans. Why not English and Tsonga or a preferred language of your choice? And that is why I'm saying it is an injustice issue. Ngugi wa Thiong'o has said that if you want to decolonize people or a country, you start taking their language. If you take the right of their language, you then take who they are. You confuse them. That's
actually an interesting point that you made. That is an interesting point that you've made, because there was a summit that was held by the Department of Education, and there was an issue around question papers being in Afrikaans, still saying that you're still giving what's seen as whites privilege a chance all the time, because they get to then study in their mother tongue, thus they get to improve better, not because they are smarter, but they understand better. So do you think that this should be initiated for other African languages, or we should just stick to English as a language of profession, just like Tepiso said?
No, indeed, one must be given an opportunity to write, speak, read their own language. Look at the World Cup. Coaches in and around Europe, they do not speak in that English. But here in Africa, in South Africa for that purpose, we speak English because the British has colonized us back then. If you go to Mozambique, the Portuguese have captured them, and now they speak the language of their colonizers. Now, it is important when you're in a democratic dispensation to reintroduce the system which will then look into the diverse language that we have, and one must be given that opportunity. English is not a measure for intelligence. Just because you speak English, asoro khalifile. No, are clever because of English. Or clever because utsiba hore wena umang uchakokai, and you know where you're going. But now it's used as a measure of intelligence. When you speak English in a family meeting, you get recognized more than somebody who yeah. So, and it is important to then speak and educate our kids from the early childhood to say, your language is more important.
What role does language play in the professional space?
Well, it plays a very major role, as that was being referred to earlier, that in the university you find a question paper which has Afrikaans and English. Where I work, we get emails that's in English, and then there's Afrikaans. And for me, it becomes a barrier in sense of the African languages are very beautiful, and the beauty in our languages can be expressed more if we're allowed to communicate in all our, in Zulu, in Venda, in Shangaan, in whatever. So it plays a big role in sensitivity. If now I go to an interview and I speak in Zulu, because I'm Zulu, maybe my sense of intelligence will be downgraded because I'm just speaking in Zulu. But what if I just feel like, today, you know what, let me just speak in Zulu? Then I might not get that job because they might say I can't
communicate efficiently
yeah,
enough.
and maybe it's just a matter of choice. I just don't want to speak in English. But it plays a very, very, very important role, actually. So,
do you think it's used to segregate in people?
The world over, one of the tools that is used is the language. I'll make an example. Maybe let me go biblical so that maybe I can best understood. Biblically, Moses was then saved, and the kings, the pharaohs, right? When he grew up, he found himself, or actually, I think he's a Palestine. He found that he's a Palestine. He ended up killing because of the language issue, all right? Today we're sitting. The wars because then it was a question of one cannot marry into the other people who speak sort of a foreign language whatsoever. Those words, and it's an outsider. That the child was then born because of those issues, which is that is still happening in this world today. That is the power of the language, how important it is. In each language, for an example, like in coming back, is that you will find maybe a child does something that is not. And as a father, hey, sharp. Listen to my tone. Get out sharp. Or more. Get out sharp away. Now in English, I'm going to hit you because English is soft. Because English is soft. That is culture on its own. Whatever. They talk to me soft. I'm going to hit you. That's what get out sharp. There's heaviness in that. Get out sharp. The tone already puts order immediately. The softness, whatever. You see the difference in culture, the tone. Let's speed the language. This one. When you speak Kasizulu, there's fastness, Kaskwa, there's softness. We take these things for granted. That's when we're losing our culture in that language that we are told, oh, the other one is better than the other. When you do trade, for example, Honajano China is moving into many countries because of the language. And I'm made to understand our South African government is want to pass the issue, we should be learning Mandarin. Mandarin is going to be taught in our language. We're promoting the Chinese language. Our language will face off. And this pains me like nobody's business, trust you me. I don't think it's right to say, here's a language that is unifying us as Africans. It's not being promoted. Just next door. You know, we have many African countries. You go to Mali, you go to, I think, Tanzania. There's a beautiful language, Kiswahili, which encompasses most within ourselves as Africans, to unite us. We're busy being petty language.
Okay. Just to speak to our audience, is there anybody from the audience that would just like to join in on the conversation?
Mina kama ngusipho kwala ngihlale Alexandra nami ngithanda ukuthi ngivumelane nama speak nama nepanel yethu like language is a powerful tool and when we take it into South African context how so it's lead back to divide and conquer. We've got many beautiful languages they've been here for more than many years but manje if mina ngihlangana nomperi ngizoba namahloni ukukhuluma izulu sami or isipedi sami wabo so identity njengoba bashilo nathi as South Africans we need to be proud of our languages wethu ilanguage ifana ne-culture. It's not something that like ebaso iya change nayo over time yabo.
All right, I think I just want to speak to Refilo on this. One of the audience members mentioned that where they stay, it's an area that has so many languages, people speaking so many different language, right? How do we bring back learning your language, knowing your language, but still being able to accommodate all these other languages?
I think it might be a little difficult, but I think it's safe to say one cannot separate a culture from a language. Those things are intertwined. You cannot separate the two. I'm going to say in a culture yet, African culture, we did not have the daycare centers where a group of children are then bulk in certain numbers and get taught one particular language. I think that's where it started. But we had elderly people like your grand who then passed on their wisdom and to Ngwanawa. And obviously the mother tongue was fed. Maybe you'd have Anali by 2 by 3, and that's how we then train. So in this new environment, I don't know how we're going to go about it. But maybe let me just take it from there to say, if we can agree. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I wish let's not put ourselves into a particular area within Africa. I wish to say, if first as African we agree to say, we need to have one common language. And if we agree to that, then we're going to say, let's use these very institutions of influence, like our schools, our daycare centers, universities, to say, this is the language as Africans that we agreed is going to be starting point. Respecting all existing languages at present, to say, we need a unifying language. And then we influence the daycare centers, and then we say, I've made mention, let me not be shy about it. Kiswahili, the books and early learning, Scots or the influence. In the next 20, 15 years, those generations that come have one language, and then Africa is getting divided. It's already power growth as an economy, as a continent, like the Chinese are doing. They become powerful, Chinese, because of they speak languages. They've then conquered other Tuena and moved away the Tahitians and formed China. That's why they're powerful today. That's what Africa needs to copy and do and follow suit.
Okay, so I'm going to be the devil's advocate for a moment. There was mention about question papers being in English and Afrikaans and whatnot. I'm against it, one. However, can we consider the practicality of we are a country that has 11 official languages? Are we then saying print out 11 different languages? Do we then, is it a teacher's responsibility to know that I've got 5 Sothos, however many you understand, and during the year, the language is taught in English? But then, so how do we understand that they understood it during the year? Now we're going to ask it in their question, you know what I mean? How do you say, what's a metaphor in Sotho? So the whole year you teach them it's a metaphor, and then in the question paper it's asked in Sotho. So the challenge, like it's a way deeper concept than we can, it's easy to just sit here and say English, Afrikaans. Like I said, am against the privilege that Afrikaans people get when you get to question papers, but being practical about it. And also the solution to that could be, let's have one language. Who do we choose? I'm Bedi. Am I going to be comfortable learning in Zulu? You understand what I mean? How do we then decide that, okay, this is the language we all speak, this is the medium of communication in schools, and then how do we take it to the rest of the world? You know,
Okay, just to come in there, one would say what you're raising could be a very simple question. The answer would be, let's all stick to English. So, since we all understand English, whether you're Pedi, whether you're Tswana, whether you're Tsonga, your mother tongue could be spoken at home, but in the professional space or in a school space, let's use English. This is a very touchy question. I see everybody reacting to it. No. It's a question that I'm posing to each member of the panel. I just want to pick your brain on, if we had to learn, and let's say we're learning in English, what is your take on that? Since it's a language that is national, every province, I want to say professional, every province, national, international, everywhere you go, English is there. So one would say, let's set a benchmark for English. What then happens to our natives? Let's start with you, Adolf, and then we'll make our way down the line.
You see, I don't know whether we have enough time to deal with the matter at hand. But let me start here. My name is Adolf. That alone is a problem. And many Cynthias, Juliuses, Thomases around here who are black. That is where the problem is. And we're not denying the fact that English must be learned as a medium of instruction and as a language central to everyone. We're not denying that, but we're saying or suggesting that in the education system, from the early childhood development, learn 2 more African or South African languages. And as you go gradually, you drop these 2 that you have learned, at least you can commune with those, then change to the other. By the time you're at grade 12, you would have then learned all the 11 languages. But what is the point of a child in Venda learning Venda from early childhood to grade 12 without even incorporating Zulu, Xhosa, and any other language of this own origin? And it is a problem to, not only with the name Adolf, Afroview, for example. You could have chosen Ukahlamba, you could have chosen any African name. The problem is that the thinking, it's colonized still. It still thinks that English is best over than the other. It's a superior language. And we must deal with that first before we go forward. Because it is not fair for my child to learn only English in an environment where there's 11 languages. It therefore suggests that English is super language than the other. All we are suggesting is, while you're learning English all the way from 0 to Z, incorporate
Can we
other
make
languages.
Space for an African
Get
language?
other languages. And this English thing does not really add up, because to me it feels like we're forced to speak English. If you can't speak English, you can't be employed. If you can't speak English, you're not a better person. You even call it professional yourself. Who said it's professional? Who said?
But the aspect of no. The aspect of profession means that workspace and across the nation. If right now we had to learn Tsonga by itself. Oh, you need to. Okay. I'll deal with you, Refile.
Today, you know that the French and the English, they don't see eye to eye today. The so-called professional good languages, easy, accessible. You know why? Because they're promoting their own language, their own culture, that language. In DRC, which is in Africa, by the way, in case you don't know, they speak French. South Africa, most of the African South Africans speak English. These languages were forced down the people's throat from older generation. It didn't come easy.
Yes.
And now we're saying the better language is English. I shouldn't be talking Luenaka English as we speak now. I should be talking Luenaka, one of the African languages. And I think as Africans, we're too shy to be robust at the issues of language because of our culture. Let me tell you something, Auswak. Today we're talking the Youth Month, right? You know the results are 76 riots. What was the cause? I hear there's an issue of the youth then wanted freedom, whatever. It's not about that. It wasn't about politics. It was about the language. They were not happy with language because they understood. It has nothing to do with any political parties. Yes. It has nothing to do. Political parties
Just
those
jumped
youth
in the
never
wind.
speak language because never understand that language carries so much. You know? That language, because of question papers.
Here's what I think we are missing here. It's not that, like she said, professional. And if you notice, she was very reluctant to use the word professional. Very reluctant. It's not that we are saying Venek is what. I think we all agree on one thing on this table. We're all black. We all agree. You know what I mean? But it's very important to bring other aspects of it, and more than anything, to be practical. Practically speaking, education in this country, the education system as it is in Africa, was brought Gaskebe. You know what I mean? It was not brought by black people. So now that we are governed by a black government politician, this is now where we come back and say, let's go back to the drawing table. You are not going to... I still have a problem with the fact that Jan van Riebeeck is still taught in school. I have an issue with that. You know what I mean? He is not an important part of our history. Yes, they came in and did whatever they did, but at the end of the day, it's very important for a black child to know where they come from. You know what I mean? So we need to then go back to the drawing board with the government to say, okay, let's fix it. It's a black government run by black people. You know what I mean? Let's fix it. Let's put in the languages and all of that.
Adolf, just a quick one.
I would like to just break it down. Like, I think language, it starts from at home. First, I'll tell you my story. I grew up I was brought up by white people. English was nothing. Like, until I got to a point where I went to visit my grad in Soweto. And actually, funny enough, I was speaking to my mom this other day. We're talking about me having a fight with my friends, so-called. We were fighting over a stone and a leech. They're saying this is a stone, Menangiti leech. We're fighting over the same thing, but because the language barrier, the language
It's there.
It's like now we're having a very hard fight, but it's just the same thing. And then, luckily enough, as time went, I lived in Soweto. Zulu, I didn't know much of it. Started Zulu, I knew Zulu. I was okay, got to high school, and then I went to I can hear Venda. I can speak a lot of these. I can speak like 3 languages, but from where I came from an English point too. So that's what I'm saying. It starts from home. If at home we are taught our home languages and not being afraid to say, no, when you go to your work, when you go to your friends, speak in your language, and it becomes much more easier. From there, if you started at grassroots level, it can be done.
And then from our audience, do we have anybody that would like to add to the discussion?
Sanmanani Kamalam Ngute Minwagamanana. And one thing that we need to understand is that not necessarily black people, but people are better led when there's no understanding. And one thing the system has mastered was to take away the confidence, the bravery, and the understanding from our languages. And that has left us as a black people the most vulnerable in society. We cannot also run away from the fact that the language on its own has further perpetuated the class struggles that we have in society. Because my black conditions and Marvin's black conditions are not the same. So I can be black, I live in Alex, and you can be black and live in Midrand or Senton, but our blackness is not the same. So we need to understand that when they took over the country, they took over a country that had a majority of black people who spoke various languages, and they maintained the one that is actually very minimal. So that it shows that there's an imbalance in society, and nobody has an interest of actually bringing it back to us, because now we need to further maintain the system that's not benefiting us. So we need to get back our language. How we get it back and who does it, we don't care either way. Because at the end of the day, whoever created the system was sitting somewhere thinking on how do I maintain my culture, my family principles and values without actually having anybody disturb it, but had no black person in mind. So language is a very virtual tool that we actually need to use as black people.
Sanibonani, mina nguntokozo ngakamazibuko. Indaba yolimi, cha mina ngizokhuluma ulimi lami ngempela. Indaba yolimi ibaluleke kakhulu njoba sekukhulunyiwe nje kakhulu ngalo. Ingane kakhulukazi. Uyabona ubuhlungu kabi kuba nengane, uthothi ingane yakho ayilazi ulimi layo. Ngenxa yani na umacaphuna kusale ingane yakho ihamba lezi izikolo lezi zasesilungwini ngasho kanjalo. Uyabona kubuhlungu kabi ingane yakho ingalazi ulimi lami. Mina ngiyazazi, mina ngizalwa intombi yamazibuko. ngunzima umunu umwelasi uphuthina umgabha mafu ngumntunga ngumbulazi kamzilikazi kamashobani. Yes.
I think it would be fitting to have Rufile close off this for us, since language is really his expertise.
I wish to highlight this. I think it's very key. The events that made us rebel the Youth Month was a question of language. And those events were started by a movement called the Black Consciousness. One of the people on the floor mentioned the question here, the Black Consciousness movement. That's what started. And the people who started, we don't even talk about them today. Your Steve Biko, Nkgopotse Tuiro, Strini Mutli. These are the people who started. And that's why I say it wasn't about politics. It was about language. It will help us to understand that. Let's not put politics into this, but the language itself. And I want to emphasize and share with you the power of the language and how the language can be used to unite or even divide people. In January 1983, Robert Mugabe's government launched a massive security down on Matabele land. These are one of the people within Zimbabwe who speaks a different Matabele. It was led by a North Korean trained almost exclusive Shona-speaking army. All right? Known as the army unit was known as the 5th Brigade. They committed thousands of atrocities, including murderous rapes, mass torture, right? Now, this is between the Mandebele and the Shona people. There's the African people, because of the language amongst themselves. The other one is holding power, killing the other one. I'm trying to be short now. It is estimated that between 10,000 to 20,000 unarmed civilians died at the hands of the 5th Brigade because of the issue of the language. Here are Africans killing each other because, now, please, let's not undermine. But if these two Africans had one language that they were speaking themselves, do you think they would be killing each other this month? They wouldn't. And that is why I'm saying, let's not dilly dally and agree to say, let's do something, not tomorrow, not when. And here's what I'm suggesting now, in closing. If right now, I think I forgot that book, I wanted to come with a book, Mokiring Kiwisha, without coercing anybody in any way. Let's start signing as Africans, because a journey of 1,000 miles begin with one single step. And those who think what I'm suggesting is good, we're going to sign now to say Africa needs to have one language. And probably, let's start with Kiswahili. And see what 15 years down the line, want Africans being united in their diversity, but having a common language that engage China, the French, but there's an African language that you must learn as a British, as a French. We meet each other halfway.
Thank you. This has been yet another interactive show with the youth and the generation that came before them. Join us again next week when we'll be discussing black tax and what exactly it means for the black child and the society. From myself and the team behind the scenes, thank you for watching. Catch you next time.